Welcome to another podcast of Rare Conversations. We're coming to you from the downtown office of Ricardo Amigo Real Estate, and today's guest is a former agent. He's been around for quite some time in the Todos, Santos, Cabo area. I'm really privileged to have Mark Rockwell here with us today. Mark, let me just give you a little brief history. Mark was one of the pioneers of sales agents in Los Cabos, but also in this area. He kind of navigated the terrain for a lot of agents in Todos Santos, Pescadero, Elias Calle, and we're going to talk a little bit about his career as a real estate person, but we're also going to talk about some of his ventures in life and what he's seen and some changes that have taken place during his time in the Baja. I would also like to mention his son Cabo also works for our company, Mark Rockwell, and Mark is retired now, but he worked with us. Cabo worked with us. His Cabo's wife Claudia works with us, so it's kind of nice to have their family with us. Mark, I just want to talk about what year did you arrive to Los Cabos?
Oh, well, the first year was probably 1973, but that was traveling here pertaining to Rancho Gaspareño, just a little bit after that. There was, at 73, they had just completed probably 80% of the highway.
So you actually were coming down before the highway was completed.
Many times. Actually, the first time I went to Mexico, I was born in La Jolla, California, raised in South Oceanside on the border of Carlsbad and South Oceanside. And the first time I was in Mexico, I went across the border in the trunk of a car at 13 years old to surf K-38 in Ensenada.
You were in the trunk because?
I was 13.
Couldn't cross the border without your parents.
Back in those days, there was no drug issue. There were probably marijuana, but there wasn't an issue. So the border was pretty lax. So that was my first of many forays into Mexico. And then I was arrested for truancy a number of times, and finally made a ward of the state of California. I was deemed incorrigible. You had to go to school until you were 16, but both my parents worked. My parents were great, home was great, but when the surf was up, I grabbed my board. I was only 5 blocks from the beach, and Cassidy Street was my South Oceanside surf spot. So make a long story short, I left home a little over 14, hit the road, and didn't return till I was 25. And those travels were extensive, primarily surfing and what have you, because I didn't want to go to jail. I was going to go to prison, youth
juvenile
youth authority.
Okay.
And my dad went into World War II at 15 years old, and he just told me that 2 months after Pearl Harbor was bombed, my dad at 15 enlisted in the Coast Guard. And he says, hey, you got to wait till you're 16 and we'll sign, you can quit school. So I had all A's and B's in school. School wasn't a problem, surfing was. So again, I left and traveled the world, and quite a few. The best thing about that was I became street smart. When you travel the world at a young age, you become street smart.
So I'd like to talk about. So let's start with this. I think it was the 60s, 70s, or
60s. Well, yeah. Well, 62 was when I went across the border for the first time.
62 is when you smuggled into Mexico.
Right.
When you got smuggled in the trunk of Mexico. Talk to me. I remember you telling me a story that when you left home, you were going on surf ventures and you went to Hawaii. So what year was that?
That was 68, the middle or the end of 68, because the middle of 67, I moved to Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco.
Okay, so
that was the flower
Summer of Love, or
Pardon?
was that the Summer of Love?
Yes.
Or- okay.
Yeah.
And you moved to Haight-Ashbury. I'm not going to ask you what you did then. So, but
Well, I spent
can
my days
imagine-
in Golden Gate Park with a few thousand other people.
Yeah.
And so that was quite the experience. But after that, a lot of drugs were there, you know. I wasn't there for the drugs. I was just there. And living in the basement of a Victorian with about 12 other people, all the walls painted black, paisley furnishings, black lights. It was quite an experience. But after that, I got kind of exhausted. So I went back to LA with a friend, and we booked a ticket to Hawaii, student standby. I remember exactly June 6th. All these students, it took us 3 or 4 days to get out of the airport. There were so many students flying student standby because the ticket was cheap. When I landed in Honolulu, I had $20 in my pocket. And then 10 of that went towards whiskey with some other people. So now I'm down to $10. So then I ended up getting a job at a topless fruit bar. They didn't sell alcohol, but the Navy personnel military, right? Ended up going to Kauai, and at Honolulu, at that time, Honolulu only had a small store. But at the beginning of the trail, the Honolulu Trail, Naupali Trail, there was the Liz Taylor camp. It was called Taylor Camp. Elizabeth Taylor owned the property, and these hippies had put plastic around trees, palm trees, and they were living there. But if you hike the trail, it goes back 11 miles. At 2 miles in, it drops down, and there's a big cave. And I lived in that cave for probably 2 or 3 months, I remember.
2, 3 months with other people or solo?
Yeah, I had 2 girlfriends.
2 girlfriends.
2 girlfriends.
Okay. Can we say that on? Yeah.
Yeah.
So you guys were living in the cave on Elizabeth Taylor's property or off?
No, Elizabeth Taylor was at the trailhead.
So you were 11 miles, 13 miles.
2 miles in.
2 miles in.
It would drop down. I mean, this is 11-mile trail above the ocean.
Okay.
And it was a tourist attraction if you wanted to hike it. So there was sometimes tourists that would come in. But
Into the cave or just on the trail?
On the trail, but there was 17 of us. There was 9 girls and 8 guys. We didn't wear any clothes.
Living in the cave, there were 17 of you. And you were just living off the land?
Off the land.
Wow.
Fish and crab and bananas, breadfruit.
Were you still surfing at that point?
There was no surf there.
No surf.
Not right there, no.
So if you could go back to that cave, would you?
No.
No.
No, too old for that.
Okay.
So now, after that, I came back to the States. Well, I went to Maui, and then Wailuku, and Banana Patch. It was a hippie commune, and hepatitis broke out. So I got out of there, and luckily I had enough money to fly back, so I had saved money from my job as the doorman in Waikiki at the Topless Fruit Bar.
Topless fruit bar. So you could have a smoothie and watch your show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then I came back and just traveled around in the States, went to a number of states, and worked wherever I could, manpower, washing dishes, just whatever I could do to get by. And then at 25 years old, or 24, almost 25, I came back to the South Ocean side, and I had a girlfriend, a friend. She was a friend that was a girl, and she was working at Mariposa College. And she said that I didn't have a high school education. So she said, you should take the SAT, and she helped me study for it. I scored so high that I got offered 2 full-ride academic scholarships, and I picked United States International University in La Jolla. Graduated magna cum laude with a degree in human behavior management. And after that, after graduating, I went into the corporate restaurant field in Newport Beach, managing 2 different restaurants. And then that was Far West Services. Then I got recruited out from El Torito, and I was the general manager of the El Torito in Oceanside, California, and then was promoted to travel to restaurants. There was over 200 El Torito Mexican restaurants in the United States at the time, and to troubleshoot. They were having labor problems, food cost problems, whatever. So I did that for a year and a half, and the last place was Denver, Colorado. And then I came back and was promoted to training manager in Mission Valley, San Diego, El Torito. I was the general manager and the training manager, both. And I had 5 or 6 managers underneath me because I was training and I was running the unit. Did that and for a couple of years. And then I met a gentleman, Greg Schroeder, and went with his company. He was a broker. He had 2 companies, Silverado International and Coastal Pacific.
Now, you had met Greg in Hawaii prior, or no? This is your first meeting with Greg. But he is from, he lived in Hawaii for a long time, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but he lived in Encinitas.
Okay.
Okay, and he had Silverado International, which placed manufacturing, mainly airplane manufacturing parts, brokering those parts in outside of the United States. Coastal Pacific, where we, excuse me, where we had manufacturing in the United States. We had a job. I was his vice president of operations and put his business on computer.
So you pivoted from El Torito restaurants into manufacturing and software broker.
Yeah.
And just going back to El Torito, I remember when El Torito came to the East Coast, I was living in New Jersey at the time, and there was a huge thing. And do they still exist?
They still exist, but I don't know how many. In Denver, that unit was the first out-of-state unit that I traveled.
Out of California?
Yeah, Larry Cano was the founder of El Torito.
I wonder if they're still around. We'll look into that.
I'm sure they do, but he also owned Las Brisas in Laguna Beach. You're lucky to get in there. That restaurant is something else. And also a French restaurant in Newport Beach. But Chanticleer. Newport Beach.
But that wasn't your initial kind of introduction to Mexican food, was it? You had kind of grown up on some Mexican food as well, right?
Yeah.
And that was more kind of California Mex, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, enchiladas, suizas.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go.
Not like we could get down here.
Well, yeah, but in some respects, better. In some respects.
Okay. So now you're with Greg. You're in the manufacturing, and then
good. Then now, Greg bought a hurricane-ravaged home on the beach in Poipu, in Hawaii, on Kauai, and redid the home. And then he moved there. Okay, and moved his businesses there. When he did that, I started my own brokerage, Rockwell Ortega LLC, and I placed manufacturing primarily in Mexico. I had jobs running in Tecate, Mexicali, shortly Tijuana, and La Paz. Brenda Casillas' father, Juan, had a large manufacturing operation in La Paz, and Juan manufactured our key leads for the Maglite, the solitaire Maglite. There's a little braided keychain that you could put the little flashlight on and put it on your keychain. He manufactured millions of those for us, and then on the AA Maglite aluminum flashlight, the ones the cops always have, we the holster, the black polypro holster. We manufactured millions of those here. In Tecate, I was making handles for Corona Clipper in Corona, California, for their hand saws for garden tools.
And was this prior to when they started the maquiladoras and
No,
stuff?
this was
part of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that opened up the whole window for us. And I mean, people would contact me, mainly purchasing agents from large companies, large corporations that are manufacturing a product. They contact me and say, hey, I think our product we want to move it to Mexico, so we don't have to pay so much in labor. And so that's what I did for 9 or 10 years, más o menos. And then, for example, China started knocking products off. For example, in Mexicali, we die-casted solid aluminum garden tools. There was a hand trowel, little hand shovel, 2 sizes, and then the rastillo, mainly for women, right? With a little, we die-casted them in Long Beach, and I shipped them to Mexicali for my contractor Lalo to polish them, and they polished those parts to a shine. Then I'd ship them back to Corona, and they'd final package them. And they were solid aluminum. And all of a sudden, we had hundreds of thousands in Home Depot, and at the time Kmart. Kmart's I think Kmart's gone. But China knocked them off to the T. And the government allowed it, our government allowed it. They subsidized the cost of the aluminum. I mean, aluminum is it fluctuates in cost, but it's the same all over the world,
right.
Like gold or what have you, precious metals. So at that time, Cabos' mother, Lydia, I smuggled her across the border, and she was living with me, and the first time she got caught.
So you had already been to Mexico?
Oh, many times.
Had gotten married at that point? Not married, just dating. Okay. So you were already dating Cabos' mom and Lydia, and you brought her back to the U.S. and married her there.
Well, I paid a coyote $600 to smuggle her from Tecate. Cabos' godparents, Jaime and Teresa, live in Tecate, and Jaime arranged the coyote. But the first time, she and the coyote got caught. And luckily, they just took him right to the border and made him just walk back across. 2 weeks later, we tried again, and she made it. When she made it, I notified immigration, married her. And then notified immigration, my wife is here illegally. They said, no problem. That would be write a check for $1,000 to start the process, and another check for $250 for the fine for her being here illegally. And that was it.
That was it. That was the whole process.
Yeah. And so we were there. She was going to the Boys and Girls Club in Carlsbad to learn English. She knew very little English. And in 4 months, she was correcting my English.
Wow.
I mean, she caught up so good, so quick. Like she'd say, hey, can you go get us a pizza? Can we have pizza tonight? I go, yeah, pizza. She'd go, there's no such word as yeah. So she learned really good. So again, long story short, after almost a year, we were getting knocked off by China, and I just said, well, let's just move to Mexico. So that's what we did.
What year was that?
1997.
97.
96, 97.
Okay.
96, because, 96. And Cabo was born in 98. So we got here in 97. When we crossed the borders, late September, November 97, we drove straight through to Mulahay, and got up in the morning and Lydia was sick. She was pregnant with him, with Carlo. So again, after a while, I had to do something. I just couldn't sit around. That's when I walked into Century 21 in Cabo San Lucas. And Lydia's family was in Elias Cayas. And I got a job with, they sponsored me. At that time, you had to be sponsored an FM3 work permit.
Right, I remember that.
They sponsored me. And after a while, after 3 or 4 months, they asked me to go to the East Cape to set a lighthouse Point Estates in Los Barriles. And so Lydia was pregnant, and we rented a house in Buena Vista. And I started selling for Century 21 Lighthouse. There's only 2 of us there selling. And and then Cabo was born. And about the time Cabo was born, I had sold 6 lots at Lighthouse Point Estates to some paramedics, firemen who fishermen. They come there to fish from Lake Tahoe. And at that time, we were told that we get a $250 bonus during this period if we sold whatever's, and they never paid me.
Right.
And so I told them basically, you know what I told them.
Yeah.
And I left. We left. Lydia's mother said, well, why don't you build an office here? And they're on the highway, KM.
That would be in Elias Caye, right?
Uh-huh. So I built an office there and opened up Costa Pacifico.
Which was, you were your own broker's owner for Costa Pacifica.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And that's where it really, Cabo was, as soon as he was walking good, he'd go on tours with me. He'd be driving the car.
So you might say it was in his blood.
Yeah, hopefully.
Okay.
Yeah. So I've been selling real estate here prior to retiring for 24 years.
24 years selling real estate in Los Cabos, Todos, Santos, Elias Caye, Pescadero,
Cerritos.
And
Rancho Nuevo, I sold the last 74 lots in a package.
you sold pretty much all of Rancho Nuevo when it hit.
I sold over 100 lots in Rancho.
Which was the first kind of real developmental project here in the area.
Right.
And still, no electricity. They had a well, well water. And that was kind of you kind of introduced Rancho Nuevo to this area.
Right.
I think what you brought was more of a classic idea of operating business in the real estate manner than what was going on, rather than just flying by the seat of your pants. I know when I met you, your experience and background in real estate was far greater than anyone I had spoken to. And I had bought real estate before and down here, and your knowledge of what was going on was far exceeded a lot of people I had spoken to. You kind of had your finger on the pulse then. You always operated in an upright manner. When you came to work for us, you were always on top of the game. And I think that's your business background. And I don't know of all your travels, but I think your organization, your follow-up, I think like you were able to train people on our team who kind of needed to see what it was like to really follow up with people. I kind of think that drove you out of the business a little bit, was the time frames that closings were taking so long.
Well, it's the frustration with closing agents, closing lawyers, and also a good example would have been Casa Andre. Took 2 years to close it because the buyer,
bank, HSBC.
Well, the buyer hired attorneys, Mexican attorneys, and I always advise my buyers' clients, you don't need to spend money and hire Mexican attorneys. We can handle it all and save you that money.
Well, I think it's good that they do. Like, we have an in-house attorney. You were saying they didn't need an extra attorney. Mm-hmm. We already had the in-house attorney.
We had the closing attorney.
We always recommend people to make sure an attorney looks over documents and
Yeah,
checks
right.
that, because we're not attorneys. But I think, what would you say kind of, I know you saw it from the Wild West, and then it got, and then I remember, it kind of grew in the idea that everything was kind of going title searches,
Right.
surveys, and all that, and we started
Bank appraisals.
all of it.
Master plan came in.
Yeah, master plan in 2012, and so you saw a lot of change go through, and I think you're seeing it still. Like I know you're retired. What year did you retire?
I retired in January. It wasn't a good time to retire. I thought it was January 2020.
2020, right before COVID.
2 months before COVID. And it turned out I could have made a lot of money.
COVID could really hit here.
2020
Yeah.
and 2021, you guys sold a lot of property.
We did. So when you retired in 2020, you kind of saw the change of people coming here, kind of a different type of person, right? It was a lot more diligence was being done, a lot more kind of people coming from the US and Canada wanting to, make sure that everything was done correctly, everything was done up and up. The Wild West is kind of, I would say there are still people operating under that kind of, the idea that, oh, it's Mexico, you could just get it. But we're, in Todos, Santos, Pescaderos, Cerritos, it's really, for me, and I think we've seen a change, I think for the better, as far as making sure that people are getting what they've paid for, and also getting this level of service that they require. And I think it's changed our clientele significantly, and it's made this little nest, like this little area here, I think has grown because we've gotten more serious, and because it's still one of the most desirable places to live. I mean, I think I'll speak for me, but I think it falls for you. I still love living here after 24 years. How do you feel about it?
There's nowhere else I could live. Maybe Thailand.
Yeah.
But that'd be too far away from my granddaughter or my son.
I mean, it's still a great place to live. We've grown in the area, and we more in comparison to what Cabo. I mean, you saw Cabo grow too when you were coming down here in the 70s. Yeah. So we're still going through that process. If you could point out one thing, what would you say would be the biggest change in this area?
Regarding real estate?
No, just in general, let's say.
The biggest change is population.
Population.
And infrastructure. The need to develop infrastructure.
Yeah.
But population for sure, which brings construction, of course brings more sales, but definitely population. I mean, I've been coming here since the 70s. You wouldn't even believe Todos Santos in 1975, for example. You wouldn't believe Cabo San Lucas.
Yeah.
The first time I went to Cabo, the cannery was there, and there were fishing village right there, and a couple of canteens. There was nothing there.
Yeah.
There was nothing there.
So we're gonna wrap things up. So let me say this: you've got a son that works for me. He's an agent. He works as a project supervisor in our hospitality department, and property management. So, new agent Cabo, when he came in, what advice would you give to someone who, I know Cabo's got a couple of years now under his belt as far as real estate agent? What advice did you give to him when he started as a real estate agent?
I still give it to him.
Good.
But he doesn't listen.
Okay, but what would be good advice for a starting agent?
Number one is, in the restaurant business, my grandparents had diners. My uncle, their son. So I went in after college, and I learned the success in the restaurant business was QSC, quality, service, and cleanliness. Well, the cleanliness doesn't apply here unless, of course, you're in an office, you want to be clean, your bathroom's clean, what have you. But quality, even if you're not serving food, you've got to serve a quality product. And if you don't give service, you're not going to make a living, okay? And that service has to be better than other people are providing service, especially if you're talking about real estate, and especially if you're in, I mean, I don't know what it would be like. Sometimes I think of Jeffrey Furman,
Yep.
how he is doing in Tucson selling real estate, because the interest is so high, nobody's buying homes. So I guess we're fortunate here, even though I'm not in sales anymore. But the advice I give is that you got to give service. If your client emails you and needs an answer, you don't wait 24 hours to answer them. You don't wait 12 hours. I mean, if you're in a meeting, you check your email and you say, oh, there's the email. You don't have to answer it right then. You're in the meeting. But you better answer it when you get up. And the sooner you need to provide the service to your clients. And what that does, that becomes repetitive, not only in you, but also in your clients when they talk about you to other friends and family that are interested in buying or becoming involved in real estate in Baja. That's the number one key of service. And service entails so many aspects of your attention and your involvement, and you need to stay on it if you want to be a success. That's in any business, of course.
I mean, you're the majority of your business starting and in the day was word of mouth. You were only as good as your reputation. Digital, you had marketing,
Walmart, yeah.
but digital marketing really didn't exist at that. You weren't on Instagram, you weren't on Facebook. You were people talking about you, giving your name to other people. Hey, if you're going to buy, speak to this guy.
Many times. And it's like, I've had clients that we are so appreciative that you stayed with us. We could rely on you to give us information. We never had to wait to hear from you. You were off, whatever. That's the key. That's the whole key, because digital, everybody's digital now. So I would think it's hard starting out to make a living digital, because people need to know you. I mean, really know you.
And know what you've done in the community as well. I think there's people, you've told me you still keep in touch with clients of yours that down here that you see and run into and that you actually stay in touch with.
Yeah, I still have clients that call me or I call them and say, let's have break at Cafe Todos Santos.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a testament to how you treated people.
And I usually pay. Because I made a commission off those.
That's cool.
Off those people.
And it should be that way, right?
Right.
I really appreciate you coming in, Mark. I know it's it's great to hear some of the stories, great to hear about the history of the area, and I just appreciate you sharing that with us.
You're welcome. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. We just got done, wrapped up a great podcast with Mark Rockwell. You can find it, it's Rare Conversations. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, and on our website at rare.com. I think you'll enjoy it. It kind of talks about the history and the adventures of Mark and how he got here. So please tune in and check that out and other podcasts. Thanks.